This is our Mitsibishi Mini split. It has been causing me troubles for a couple years. The trouble it's been having is it won't switch from heat to AC or vice versa. Wouldn't switch from AC to heat. Pretty irritating. And finally figured out what was causing the problem, so that's what I'm going to talk about today. Now, what's really great is even if you don't have a Mitsubishi like I do, maybe you have a different mini split or different system than I do, this solution will probably work for you as well. So check out what we're doing here. It works really great. Our house, when we moved in, technically didn't have any heat in a few rooms and definitely didn't have AC. So the mini split solved that problem. It gave us heat and AC. But the problem was it wasn't switching modes from heat to AC. Really, really irritating. So I would call the technician who installed the thing and say, hey man, come out to my place. My units won't switch from AC to heat or heat from AC. I can't figure it out. I've been switching breakers. Nothing's working. And then before he'd make it to my place, all of a sudden it would magically work. Just really irritating, annoyed the heck out of me. So like, here's the one in our kitchen up here. So what we do is we basically like grab the remote and tell it, okay, you're in heat mode right now, switch to AC. And it would just say no. And the little flaps on the machine would close. So just like this, the flaps would close. There's a little green light here that would just blink, 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 nonstop. And it wouldn't switch modes. Really, really, really irritating. So that was happening in the kitchen and also in our like living area where we have a ceiling unit, which this is really cool. So neither one of them would switch modes, and it was getting, again, very irritating. And what was going on here is we don't always run ours full time. So in the spring, we like to just open our windows. We don't want AC blowing or heat blowing during the times that we have our windows open. So we would turn off two of our units, our living room unit and our kitchen unit. We would just kind of turn off. And then when it changed from spring to summer, starting to get hot, and then we'd want to kick on the AC when it was getting into the 80s or 90s, and they just wouldn't switch. It was mind-boggling. And then eventually they would, for no good reason. And then coming into the fall, you know, we'd switch off the AC, because you don't need AC in the fall, and just kind of let the room be whatever temperature it was. And then during the winter, we'd want the heat to work, and again, wouldn't turn on, wouldn't switch modes, grab the remote, push all the buttons on the remote, boop, 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 nothing. Wouldn't switch modes. The flaps would open for a second and then they'd close and a little annoying green light would just blink. Couldn't figure it out. Until one day, I came up with a solution, and it's based on I guess we'll call it a feature of these systems. And the feature is the auto mode. So we have 3 units on our house, one here in the living room, one down in the kitchen, and then one in our mother-in-law apartment. And in the mother-in-law, it was always set to the auto mode. And the auto mode I found really, really, really useless, because it lets you just pick one temperature and it'll either heat or AC itself to that temperature. And we don't like that in most of the house, because if you're ACing down to 68 degrees during the summer, that feels really chilly inside when you're coming in and out all the time. And if you're always like heating up to like 75 or 76 degrees, if you set the auto mode to 75 or 76, man, sometimes that feels really, really hot during the winter. There's no, like on these Mitsubishi units, there's not like a range you can set where heat when it gets below 64 and then cool only when it gets above 75. It doesn't give you that. You have to pick a number and it'll heat or AC to get to that exact number. Kind of irritating and not very comfortable overall. And we fixed that problem too. So what was going on is we would have these units turned off, and their last state they were in, let's say, was heat. They were in a heat state when I shut them down. Now when we turned them back on, we tried to switch them from heat to AC, and they wouldn't go. Why is that? Because the third unit, the one in our mother-in-law, was still on heat mode. And whatever the last unit is set to, whatever unit has been running continuously is set to, controls the other units. The other units couldn't switch to AC, they wouldn't switch to AC, and they're technically not connected to the other unit to override it to switch to AC. So we just had to wait till that unit decided to turn itself to AC, which then allowed these units to switch to AC. Same thing happened when we're going from fall to winter. The AC was still running in the mother-in-law because it was in auto mode, so it was using AC to push the temperature down to, like, I don't remember what it was set at. Let's call it 68 degrees. Kind of chilly, actually. But that AC mode was the last state that the machine was in, so it locked the other two machines out from switching to heat. So how did we solve that? Well, the first option we had was a terrible option, which was going into the other room and switching it. Why would you want to do that? Because each remote only controls one individual unit. They don't talk to each other. And Mitsubishi by default didn't have a Bluetooth thing to connect them together. And they have a thing called Kumo Cloud, which you could hardwire into these things, and the application's terrible. The hardware's really expensive, and from what I've read on things people have written, it just doesn't work that well. So we were kind of stuck until we found this thing. So these, kind of hard to see with all the glare, these are Cielo units. So these basically, you can program them to act like your remote, but they'll talk to each other, and there's an app on your phone you can use to control all of them at once. And when I change this one to AC, it solves the problem that we had because it overrides the other unit that was on heat, and maybe not even actively heating, it was just in heat mode, and it wouldn't allow the other units to switch to AC. This one will switch them all to the same mode, so they all work together. Now, something that's really great about this, guys, even if you don't have the same Mitsibishi Mini split that I do, it'll probably work with yours. There's like a list of 20,000 heat pumps and AC units and wall units and window units and all sorts of units that this thing will control. Basically, if it has a remote, and maybe if it doesn't, this thing will control that unit, heater, AC, whatever. There's a huge list of machines that this thing works with. This is the Cool Max or something. So I can turn it on by hand and just switch my temperature and switch different heating modes. I won't go through it, but the app's also really nice because no matter where I am, I can see what the house is set at. If the AC accidentally got turned on while I was away, I can turn it off. There's all these different heating modes, and there's also, and this is a biggie for me, it doesn't have that annoying thing where you're always set at some arbitrary temperature. You can set heat ranges. Start heating when it gets down to here, and start cooling when it gets up to here, and just keep them somewhere in the middle. How nice. So you're not walking into a freezing ass cold AC'd house during the winter just because it got a little toastier than you expected, and you're not walking into like a blazing furnace either. You know, it just kind of makes a nice even temperature. So that's how we solve the problem with these Mitsubishi units. Even though they're super reliable, they work super great, they work below freezing, super annoying feature is that one unit will lock the other units out. Solved it with this little Cielo thing. Now, the one thing you got to keep in mind is you do need one of these units to mate with one of your remotes. So if you have 3 remotes controlling 3 mini splits, where is it at? There it is. You would need 3 of these machines. So I've got one here that talks to this mini split here. And then I've got another one down here in the kitchen that talks to this mini split here, and then we've got another one in the mother-in-law that talks to that mini split there, and then all 3 of the Cielos talk together to make up their minds on what's going to be heated or cooled. But the one you set last controls the other ones. So if the one in the kitchen is set to heat, but we need some AC upstairs, we'll switch it to AC, and AC will start blowing out of that mini split. Problem solved.